Hello everyone, welcome back to the Zach GP channel, and this is your post FP2 final thoughts ahead of the qualifying deadline for F1 Fantasy. And my god, has it been a crazy 96 hours since the game's gone live? So much has happened, and there is some stuff I need to talk about very quickly before the FP2 results and how your team should look. But as you know, I like to keep these videos nice and short on the post FP2 side. It's going to be straight to the point, boom boom boom. I'll give a short reason as to why I think this, and comment down below and I'll get to some questions if there's anything I miss out. But first of all, we need to talk about all the drama about the pricing. Now, if you haven't been on Twitter recently for F1 Fantasy, it has been mayhem. It has been the wild, wild west. Everyone is freaking out. No one knows exactly what's happening. But F1 Fantasy Tools, who are normally very reliable, and the people I adore as well, I love their website, definitely check it out, have come out with potentially their cracked price system. And I have to say it right now, I think for the first time I've been doing F1 Fantasy videos, I am stumped. I don't know what to say. Before I even start trying to explain it, I have to come in straight away. I don't think they get many things wrong, but this simulation of the price changes has to be wrong for F1 Fantasy's sake. If what F1 Fantasy Tools has down is correct, the game's already ruined before a single race has happened. So what we know most likely is correct is the A tiers and the B tiers of anything 20 million or above is in one threshold, and anything below in the B tier is another threshold. So in the B tier threshold, you can go negative 0.2 to negative 0.6 down, and plus 0.2 and plus 0.6 in value. Same thing goes for the A tiers, however it's 0.1 and 0.3, both negative and positive. But here is where it gets very confusing, as normally this season it's going to be an average of your points you've scored for your drivers and constructors for the price changes over a consistent 3 races. Now this is the issue, because the first 2 races are a whole different kettle of fish that I'm not even going to try to get into at the minute. But the summary on that is that potentially for the start of the season, it's going to be ridiculously hard to get above that points threshold to increase your prices. That's why most drivers and constructors in F1 Fantasy Tools look like they will drop down in Australia, with now the outlier being the tier B constructors. Now with pit stop points being so much, they should easily be able to get over this threshold. Even just after one race, you could be seeing Alpine just get alone like 10, 20 points or even more from pit stops alone, which would be enough already for them to get that 0.6 million increase. However, for race 3 and beyond, the average points per million for a great weekend, getting your driver either 0.3 or 0.6 would be 0.367. Then between 0.2 and 0.367 would be good, and that would again be 0.2 or 0.1 increase. Then 0.033 to 0.2 would be poor, getting you a minus 0.2 or minus 0.1. And then anywhere below that, again, depending on tier A or tier B, would get you minus 0.3 or minus 0.6. Which, if you couldn't guess by now, is just ridiculously easy for everyone to get above that great threshold. So if I'm giving you an example, let's take Esteban Ocon. After race 3, this is how ridiculous it sounds. For him to get a 0.6 million increase, he would need 2.68 points or above on average for the last 3 races. And of course he's going to get that. That is ridiculously low, so this can't be right. And then the other thing is, some people have speculated that it could be cumulative. So it's actually 2.68 times 3, and then that's the average, which would make a lot more sense, as Ocon getting 8 million would deserve that 0.6 million increase and would make a whole lot more sense in how the price changing works. However, I don't think this is what F1 Fantasy Tools' formula is saying, so again, it's so inconclusive if this would actually be right. However, the reason I don't believe it's worth going for this budget building is realistically the only weekend you would actually see a big price increase compared to any other team that would normally be run would be the first week, where B tier constructors could gain 0.6 million most likely, more than A tier assets. And then with the safer A tier drivers, you could also keep an extra 0.4 million losses from the B tier drivers. So for China, you could be up 1 million. But then for this race and after, especially as it's a sprint race in China, the cheap drivers won't be an issue anymore and will most likely hit their threshold, which would then equal out the price gains between each team, as the budget team would have 4 0.6 million potential increases and 3 0.3 million, which is identical to the normal teams of a Piastri, Ferrari,
Ferrari, Mercedes with the rest of the assets being B. And even if you went Lawson, McLaren, Red Bull direction, you would actually have 5.6 million increases, so you'd actually start catching up on the rest of the field. So my question to you is it worth getting that 1 million increase in your team value for one race weekend, but you could potentially go 40 to 80 or even more points down if you went with these budget teams? For me, it's no.
It just doesn't sound right. So for me, especially this weekend, now I'm going to give you a team for if you want to follow this route and you believe F1 Fantasy Tools and go the budget route. But for me, I'm not going anywhere near this. There's too many inconsistencies. Even F1 Fantasy Tools themselves have said it looks a bit sketchy. I'll put this comment down in their Discord below. It just doesn't make enough sense for me to go for this. And I just think, I know F1 Fantasy have made quite a few mistakes in the past, but this is such a royal cock-up. I can't in any situation see them letting this happen. Because let's say this is the way they're going, there's going to be so much uproar after race one that I think they could change it straight away after that. Something just isn't adding up, and that's why I think it's too much risk involved to go for the budget building, because then you've just taken the budget building team without the upsides of getting all of those extra increases compared to every other team. So you can see I'm not going to be going for that. However, let's go talk about the FP2 results and see how it affects some of the team selections we've already talked about over on FanAmp, and let's get busy.
Now, looking over especially FP2 results, as you can see, I'll just show you the FP1 results. It really is all about setup. FP2 is where they do qualifying runs. As suspected, it is a tale between McLaren and Ferrari for now, with Charles Leclerc topping the timings, with Piastri second, Norris third, and a surprise in fourth, and then Hamilton in fifth. So for me, this means definitely you need to have either one of these two in your teams, either if it's with the Piastri, Ferrari, Mercedes build, or the Lawson, McLaren, Red Bull team. However, because of how close Ferrari looked to McLaren, I very much am looking towards that Piastri, Ferrari, Mercedes build, as Red Bull look quite dreadful at the minute. Piastri will get a very good DRS boost, potentially from the driver of the day and a podium position. Plus, Ferrari not actually looking that far behind as a constructor compared to McLaren, equals out the points compared to what Lawson would bring, meaning Piastri definitely going to get more points than Lawson probably would score you more points. Now, Yuki Tsunoda, who went up to 4th place, looked incredible. However, you've just got to be careful with an asset like this because he is ridiculously pricey, and realistically, if you're going for one of the normal teams like the Piastri, Mercedes, Ferrari, or the Russell, McLaren, Mercedes, or even the Lawson, Red Bull, McLaren, you can't bring Tsunoda in without taking a hit on your constructors. And it's never worth taking a hit on your constructors. So I don't think, even though Yuki Tsunoda looks pretty good in FP2, I don't think he's worth it as an asset. And even on the budget building, he would still need to get around 10, 11 points to not drop in points if the price system is right. So even on a budget reason, it just doesn't seem worth it to take a risk on Yuki Tsunoda, no matter how good he looks right now. However, the same can't be said about his teammate Hadjar, who was in 6th place. Now this looks interesting. If Hadjar can keep up this sort of pace in qualifying and the race, he is a gold mine at 6.2 million at the minute. 100%, I think I'm definitely looking at him for my team now. Of course, we haven't seen the race pace, so he could drop down, meaning that he's worse off in general, but 6th place at the minute in FP2, you can't look away from. Hadjar all of a sudden is one of my favourite cheap drivers to bring in. Now, funnily enough, the opposite has happened for sort of the same reasons for Nico Hülkenberg, as Hadjar in 6th would be plenty of points to recover from any losses in the race. If he qualified 6th, finished 9th, it'd still be decent. However, Hülkenberg, on the other hand, if he qualified 8th and dropped down, it wouldn't be fine. So that's why Hülkenberg's a little bit sketchy in my books, because if he can actually get that Sauber into the top 10, I expect the race pace to not be there, so I don't think Hülkenberg's the safest shout this weekend. So for me now, Hülkenberg is a no-go. And then FP2-wise, I think the only other teams we need to talk about are Mercedes and Red Bull, because they do not look good. It is quite scary how bad both of those teams look. Now, I know it's just FP2. We'll probably see a lot more from them. I doubt they're actually that far behind. But for now, it looks like Mercedes are stronger than Red Bull. But they very much look closer to Alpine and Williams-ish compared to the McLarens and the Ferraris. Now, I'm not holding out for this. I still think they'll be completely fine. And you've sort of just got to pick one or the other in your teams anyway. So you have to just take it on the chin and hope for the best. But That is why I'm a little bit worried about the George Russell builds with George Russell, McLaren and Mercedes, as Mercedes as a constructor don't look too incredible, and George Russell, if he actually is in the bottom end of the points, it's going to screw your team quite royally over. You'd probably be closer to the budget team points. Same with Red Bull. If you go for the Lawson build this weekend, if he really is that bad, it's going to be really hard on a wet track to get some overtakes and not crash out with all of this carnage. It would end up being not ideal for you. So keep an eye on those two. They're not completely off the cards, but for me, let's head over to the team selections and look at my favourites. So my favourite for this weekend is definitely the Piastri build. And what do I mean by Piastri? Well, that is Piastri, Ferrari and Mercedes. I'm not too keen on Mercedes, but Piastri looks brilliant here in FP2, plus driver of the day points, plus DRS boost on him. He'll get you plenty of points. He's fine. Then you add in some cheap drivers like Hadjar, both Hasses potentially, even though they didn't look amazing. I think it'd actually be pretty good if they were 19th and 20th. However, I did forget to mention Behrman. Be careful of Behrman, he did have a crash. Maybe we look elsewhere. Maybe we replace Behrman with Hadjar, that sort of thing. But you bring in 4 cheap assets. For me, it's most likely gonna be definitely Bortoletto, definitely Hadjar now, definitely Ocon, and then one of either Hulkenberg or Behrman. Now that team is probably my favourite coming into this weekend. It's the safest with all of these price changes as well. Like, it wouldn't affect your team that much. It still gets you a lot more points than any other team would. So I'm happy, and that's most likely what I'm sticking with. Then you've got the Lawson build, like I mentioned, where it's Lawson 2 times, not amazing, but you get McLaren as a constructor with Red Bull. Red Bull, of course, even how bad they look, they'll still be in the top 10. Definitely with Verstappen, he'll probably still be in the top 5. Plus pit stop points, they are fine. McLaren and Red Bull would get you massive points as a constructor. You'd be fine there. It's Lawson and your cheap drivers, which are risky. However, for now, it definitely is one team I'm potentially looking at. However, it's more of a team I think I'm looking at for race 2 and race 3 if the price changes are what they say. Because if the price changes are what they say past race 3, if you have 5 B-tier assets as your drivers, you're going to get loads of price change value while still getting all the points you'd need to stay competitive. And then, like we mentioned, we also have the George Russell McLaren Mercedes build. However, I would recommend not going near this at the minute. Russell's past stats here have never been good. He's crashed out here last season. Plus with Mercedes, with how they're looking, I'm not really trusting them that much. I really think there could be a big threshold between the Piastri 2 times compared to the Lawson and Russell 2 times. So if you were going for one of them, you'd probably just go for the Lawson 2 times if you're going for the big constructors. So then you actually could have McLaren and Red Bull, which look better than McLaren and Mercedes or Ferrari and Mercedes. And then finally, budget-wise, this is where it gets interesting, because if you do believe the price changes to be correct and you want to go full on budget and you don't care that it could only increase your team by 1 million compared to the rest of the field, then I would recommend going for Haas and Alpine, as they are cheap constructors. They'll most likely go past their threshold, with the likes of Piastri, Leclerc, Bortoletto, Ocon and Russell as your driver, because basically for that it would be saving your team with the A-tier assets so they don't lose any price, not having many B-tier drivers for now, because that's potentially what will be losing you the points. And then if you did this sort of system, you would then use Limitless, keep all the budget gains from that, and then probably wildcard in the 3rd race, as then you could then switch over to a Lawson McLaren Red Bull build and get even more budget moving, or you could then wildcard back to a Piastri or Russell build. And then finally, to wrap up this video, chips wise, it really is only no negative I would consider this weekend. However, like I said on Twitter, just remember, if you use it now, there is still plenty of chance that we get another Brazil 2024 somewhere on a sprint race weekend where it's even more prominent to use. And that's why I think I'm not going to use it. It just seems way too risky to just push it out on the first weekend. However, it wouldn't be the worst thing to do. I've seen a lot worse moves. So if you do go for it, I completely understand. However, that about sums up everything you need to know for post FP2 and F1 Fantasy. Now, this is quite a longer video for my F1 Fantasies, as normally it is straight to the point, and I've tried to keep it straight to the point. However, there's just been so much to talk about. So I hope you all enjoyed. Be sure to join my league. It's the featured league, the Fantasy Formula. You can find me over at FanAmp if you want my previews. So I've talked a lot over there on FanAmp. It's been brilliant over there so far. We also have a deadline stream an hour before qualifying, so be sure to tune into that. And then I'd also like to plug my own little F1 Predicts league, as we're going to have some fun just on the ZachGP channel for F1 Predict. So thank you all for watching. That is all. I will see you all over at the deadline stream. I'll also be doing a live stream on my channel before the race, just to go over how everything's going for you in F1 Fantasy before the race. But anyway, I'll see you all later. Have a good rest of your week and stay tuned for some more content.